Welcome to Heaping Spoonful, a twice-monthly conversation with restaurateurs, chefs, growers, and others who have helped generate the legends associated with the eateries across the Mid-South. The team at Benny Keith is proud to sponsor this adventure with the goal of preserving the stories that have helped cultivate an amazing food scene across the Mid-South. So kick back and enjoy a Heaping Spoonful.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Heaping Spoonful. Our goal with this podcast is to share the stories of the Mid-South's top chefs and restaurateurs with our listeners. I'm Kelly Bass, and I'm proud to be your host. Covering the restaurant scene is something I've done for, I'm old, more than 40 years. Most of that early on was doing restaurant reviews for Little Rock newspapers and magazines, long before Yelp and TripAdvisor gave everybody the opportunity to be a restaurant critic. And now, thanks to the kind folks at Benny Keith Foods, I'm a podcaster, and let me tell you, I like talking about food more than I like writing about food. Today, I'm very happy to welcome Doug Wood, the owner-operator of Catfish Charlie's in Monroe, Louisiana. So welcome, Doug.
Hey, man, thanks. Appreciate you having me.
Well, glad you're here. I will say, you've got a great website, and anybody interested in knowing more about Catfish Charlie's, now it's .biz. There are some other Catfish Charlie's around, but it's easy to find the one in Louisiana. And your restaurant's website, I was always happy when I'm doing my research to see our story. And it starts off with the fact that you come from a long line of restaurateurs. Your grandfather owned a place in Monroe, and then your uncle owned and operated a restaurant in the area. So were those places that you visited as a kid? I mean, do you have memories of going to those places when you were young?
Yes, absolutely. I was fairly young, single digits, when my grandfather's restaurant was still open and running before he retired. That was Harry's Seafood in Monroe, Louisiana. And I can remember just going in there, the inside, not the outside, but the inside of the restaurant was made to look like the inside of a boat. Cool. Obviously, as a young kid, it was a very cool place to be. And I would go back to the kitchen and ask my grandfather to cook me something. And I can remember one Christmas, my Christmas present from him was a gallon of mustard, because I wanted mustard on everything that I ate. So he had got me a gallon of mustard from the restaurant. But it was just a great place. Great. And a staple in Monroe for a long time. It was actually the first place that ever served boiled crawfish in Monroe.
Wow. That's
Louisiana.
Cool.
So,
and then your uncle had a spot, which I don't know if that was close to Monroe or not.
Yeah, about 20 minutes away south on Highway 15. It was called Bend of the River, and it was 17 years in business until my uncle was tragically killed in a car wreck, and the family finally decided just to kind of go on and do different things. But man, it was a happening spot. It was a travel destination. Yeah. You had to travel a little bit, and it was sat right on the Beth River. And yes, we would go in there quite often as well. My grandmother actually was a waitress there for a good many years. So that is totally cool. Yeah, it was a great place. Good times.
Some of those destination restaurants are almost become like cult classics. There's a few around Arkansas that people make an effort to get there, and then love the food when they get there. So,
right.
It's one thing to have restaurants in your family, and another one to own it yourself. So, we were talking before we started recording, and I know that you were a waiter at Copeland's. I don't know if you'd had any in Monroe. I don't know if you'd had any restaurant experience before that, or was that just a job because you needed to make a little money and spend a little and then fill a little time?
Yeah, just out of high school, I was bussing tables at a local restaurant, and then got into banking. And when I got into banking, I kind of got out of college. And when I decided to get back into college and pursue my degree, then I went and started waiting tables at Copeland's in Monroe. Charlie Coleman was the general manager. And that's kind of how, I got to know him. And then years later, he opened a restaurant with a couple of partners in West Monroe an Italian place, and he asked me to come manage. And I went from there to selling restaurant point of sale, which is one of the great blessings of where we're at today, is because I spent 7 years selling to restaurants in a 5-state area over the South, selling point of sale. And so after 7 years before I bought the restaurant, I had sold somewhere close to 300 restaurants point of sale systems. Wow. And there were only about 50 left still open at the end of my tenure.
Wow.
And the one thing that I learned from that is that the 50 that were open, their owners were present in the business just about every single day. And
right.
That's kind of the way we've gone about it here, and it seemed to have worked well.
Sure. Well, you learned a lot about what went well and what went not so well, and you also get all up in restaurants business when you're selling them a point of sale system. So I'm sure there's a lot of good data there. So one of those POS that you sold was to Charlie Coleman at Catfish Charlie's, which I guess he had opened in 2005. And talk us through. I guess it just like it. Some point, most folks decided maybe they're ready to get out of that side of the business. So talk us through how it went from working with Charlie for at least the third time with a point of sale system to buying his restaurant.
Well, he about 2 years in, he called and he said, "I've got some guys in San Antonio, Texas that own and operate about 15 Italian restaurants. And they want me to come and oversee all of that, and I can't pass it up. Do you want to buy the restaurant?" And I said, "Not no, but heck no," because I'd seen so much in the 7 years of doing the point of sale system. But about 6 months later, we decided to do the deal. I was tired of traveling and not being with my family, and so my wife and I decided to buy it, and we jumped in feet first.
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, you learned that you better be on site and paying attention. It sounds like your wife has done and is doing the same thing. So, and you also, I'm assuming you had a clientele. I mean, clearly he'd been open for some part of 3 years at the point in time that you purchased it. Was the menu, because one thing that just is striking, and I hope people will go to your website and look at your menu, is it's really diverse. It's broad and it's deep. Was it that way when you bought it, or have you expanded it out over the years?
We've definitely expanded it out, but it's still, when I bought it, Charlie had a very diverse menu. He was a very wise restaurant operator. And one thing that when you come to, let's say, when you come to work at Catfish Charlie's, you realize there's a lot of clientele that are in here 2 or 3 times a week. And that's because one day they can get a burger. One day they can get a pasta dish with chicken. One day they can get, their seafood. And everything that we do, we try to do very, very well. So people just kind of use us as a staple restaurant, numerous times a week. So I have added quite a few menu items that have worked, and I've added some that are no longer with us because they didn't work.
Sure.
But fish tacos and the catfish darbone, which is one of the saucy specialties, and fish and chips most recently. Did a true English-style fish and chips, and it has gone over crazy well. So, yeah, we try to make it diverse.
Yeah, and fish and chips, I mean, the fish and catfish are both fish, but they're not the same fish and they're not cooked the same way. So you certainly have got some diversity there. And, it was interesting when I, look at your menu, it's real clear that your thin and crispy catfish is a real specialty there. I guess that's exactly what it sounds like. It's a thinner fillet and it's crispy. I mean, is that pretty much what it is?
Yes, it is. We take a 4 to 5 ounce Superior Farms catfish fillet, and then we slice that, depending on the thickness of the fillet that we're working with, we slice that 2 to 3 times long ways. So, like when you order a 1 fillet thin and crispy at Catfish Charlie's, you're going to get 3 pieces. Unless they're great big pieces, that meant that fillet was only big enough to cut once and make two pieces out of. But anyway, so it's about a third of the size of a whole catfish fillet, and we fry it up crispy, and it's number one seller. It's been a great item.
Yeah, and you don't end up with less fish. You just end up with more pieces and more crunch. It
That's
does
right.
sound good. Was that something that somebody thought of, or did you just cut it thin one time and somebody's like, man, I love this thin stuff? Or was that a conscious decision to go with the thin and crispy as an option?
Right. Well, as a Louisianan, just about any of us can tell you there's a place in Manchac, Louisiana, that is famous for their thin and crispy. It's a place called Middendorf. Okay. And growing up as a kid, anytime we went anywhere close to New Orleans, my mom and dad were stopping by Manchac and going to Middendorf's and ordering thin and crispy. So it was something that was very prevalent in my life. And Charlie already had it on the menu because it was something, it was something that Copeland's had done. So he was familiar with it. So Charlie had it on the menu, but he never really pushed it. But when I came in, I knew everyone in Monroe, Louisiana always talks about Manchac and the thin and crispy, Middendorf's. So I started pushing it. And before you know it, and to this day, it's number one seller. So
right. And for people whose geography of Louisiana is not up to speed, Monroe and New Orleans are not super close together, so it's not like you're taking something that's just right down the road.
Right. Yeah, we're 4 hours away from them. Right. So.
Yeah, and my wife and I, we're recording this episode in mid to late March of 2023, just for give you a reference point. Well, in about 3 weeks, we're going to New Orleans. I'm going for a conference, and of course, we're extending. So we're already plotting our eating strategy, which is whenever we go to New Orleans, we've pretty much done a lot of research. So that's cool that you're able to bring back something not right in New Orleans, but on the way. That really sounds good. So catfish, and again, we'll talk a lot more because catfish is one of those things in the South you just can't go wrong with if you do it right. And I'm old enough to remember the days when catfish wasn't all equal. I mean, it's not equal necessarily, but you can get farm-raised catfish. But you all are proud of the quality of the fish you sell. I guess you just got a good line on really excellent fish.
Yeah, we really do. And we have tried every single provider, and not saying anything, poorly about any catfish farm or supplier, but Superior, where they're different is they're in the Mississippi Delta. But the area that they're in, their ponds were actually carved out of lime rock beds. So therefore, there's very little mud in those ponds. So it makes the flavor of our catfish very clean and very consistent. And yes, we have to pay more for that particular fish, but it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah, because any complaints you hear about the taste of catfish, the word muddy often comes up. So having minimal to no mud in the ponds where they're raised is great.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned earlier, Doug, that you feature a broad and deep menu. So let's dive into some of those items. Because again, I'm just kind of working top to bottom, and at the top of your menu are your starters, and it clearly says all made from scratch. And I also went in doing my exhaustive research on these Heaping Spoonful episodes. I turned to TripAdvisor, and man, right off the bat, I got struck by people talking about your fried cheese sticks, which tells me obviously they're homemade, and they look like they're ample. They're not little tiny things.
That's right. We when we decided to add a cheese stick to the menu, I told my Cisco rep at the time, is who I was buying from, hadn't found out about Benny Keith yet. But I told my rep, I said, hey, bring me some samples of some different, your best cheese sticks. And so we sampled literally about 15 types of pre-made cheese sticks. And when we got through, he said, hey, what do you think? Which one? I said, bring me a fresh loaf of mozzarella tomorrow. And he said, okay. And we cut that and fried it. And I said, that's my cheese stick. And that's what we've done ever since. And it's definitely our number one selling appetizer, hands down.
Right, might be called cheese log instead of cheese.
Yeah.
Stick, 'cause I saw a picture for sure.
Yeah.
Well, then tell us what swamp fries are, because that's not clearly obvious when you just read the words.
Yeah. That's another new item that has done exceedingly well. So we take fries directly out of the grease, and we put those on a plate. We put our special fry seasoning on top of those, and we cover that with fine shredded pepper jack cheese, cheddar jack cheese, and then we'll have a strip of etouffee and then a strip of a cream sauce on top of that, topped off with a little cayenne pepper and parsley, and they are delicious. A lot of people order them just as a meal. Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, I was going to say.
A lot of people order it just as a meal. Yeah.
Bring me a fork and let's go to town. I also saw on your onion rings that you use purple onion, which I love. Purple onion. Are they the thin kind, thick kind, or kind of in between?
It's a thin. I would call it a thin. Yeah. It's not a super thin, but it's double battered, so they look thicker once they hit the plate. But they are double battered, and I just love the flavor of that purple onion, especially when you fry it.
Yeah, it's got a little more kick to it for sure. And then I see, again, as a good Southern restaurant, you got two styles of gumbo and a Louisiana restaurant, and you got the seafood gumbo and a chicken and sausage gumbo. Are those basically cooked the same way, same roux, just switching out the meats? Yes, and we do a lighter roux. In one batch we'll put the seafood, and the other separate batch we'll put the chicken and sausage, and so they're basically the same. You just get your choice of what protein you want. Yeah. Is it andouille, or what kind of sausage do you use?
It is andouille. Yeah.
Man, that sounds great. And then I see that you got gator bites, and gator also makes it on the po' boy menu. I didn't know gator was readily available, but obviously it must be. You're not going out and getting your own gators.
No, not doing that. And yes, Benny Keith has that readily available in several, styles and formats. We use the tail meat, which I think is the most flavorful. And we cut those into small, nuggets. And yes, you can get those as an appetizer or on a po' boy, and another really big seller, especially for folks that come from out of state. They want to try that alligator.
Sure. Just to say they did for sure, and see if it tastes like chicken. Your po' boy menu again is just as diverse as your starters. You got 8 options, and crispy, which means fried, I'm sure, grilled or blackened. Of course, you've got oysters, you got shrimp, but you got a lot of other choices. Any of those the big sellers as opposed to some of the others?
Number one seller is the shrimp po' boy, and we're using a really nice sized popcorn shrimp, and we overstuff all of our po' boys. But that when you put that 6 ounces of shrimp, fried shrimp on that po' boy, it just, it's you look at it and you're like, how in the world am I going to eat this?
It's overflowing, I'm sure.
It is overflowing for sure. And then the catfish po' boy, fried catfish po' boy is a big seller. And then I would say oysters probably coming in a close third. Yep.
Do you use any particularly special bread, or just a good solid loaf?
We use Laudenheimer's out of New Orleans. Yeah,
famous.
It's we get that from Benny Keith, but it is a great bread for a long time. And what Charlie was using was the Gambinos, and you have different groups of folks that like the Gambinos more, some like the Laudenheimers. But to me, and I love the Gambino bread, but it is very, very heavy to me compared to the Laudenheimer. So I think we've already got enough meat on this po' boy, so we don't need to fill up on,
you don't need a
bread.
Gotcha. Well, really can't go wrong. Those are the 2 most famous ones for sure. That's cool. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a short break here on Heaping Spoonful, and we'll be back in just a bit with Doug Wood of Catfish Charlie's in Monroe, Louisiana.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Heaping Spoonful. We at Benny Keith Foods enjoy talking about the food scene almost as much as we enjoy providing the top quality ingredients that help restaurateurs and chefs across the Mid-South create their magic. Now let's dive even deeper into the culinary world with your host, Kelly Bass.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Heaping Spoonful and our conversation with Doug Wood. Doug, at the top of your menu, you give customers the option of spicing things up a bit with snappy or snappy. And then I saw on your popcorn shrimp po' boy, you give them the chance to bang it up. So I think I know a little bit about what that might be, but tell us about those choices and what snaps things up and whether people go that route very often.
Okay. Snappy, make it snappy, snappy. That's all that is adding a little cayenne pepper on top. And in Louisiana, a lot of our folks like it spicy, hot, and cayenne is a major ingredient, for us.
Sure.
And so that is what that's about. If you want to just spice it up a little bit, you say make it snappy. And then if you want to really douse it, it's snappy. And I'm going to tell you, it does vary on the weather. When it's super hot outside, we have less of that. And when it's cold outside, it's just like every ticket. Make it snappy, and they want to be warmed up. The Bang It Up is just a sauce that we came up with. We make it homemade, and it's kind of like I guess you would say like a boom boom pop or a boom boom shrimp dish, and we coat it, and you can actually, we have customers now that like it so much, they'll come in and get a 4 shrimp and 2 filet or a thin and crispy basket and say, bang it up. So it's really, it's a popular option for sure.
Sure. And of course, again, your Catfish Charlie's and fish and seafood are your focus, but one thing I've learned, and we're up over 80 episodes of Heaping Spoonful now, is you really can't go wrong with a burger. Sometimes that's just, last night my wife's like, you know what I really want? I want a good cheeseburger. And I knew where to go get one in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I brought it home. But you got a burger, and tell us about that and what makes it different than just a run-of-the-mill burger.
Yeah. Well, we use a burger that I've used for 15 years now. It's a TNT burger, it's 5.3 ounces. We cook it slower, so we don't, burn it up or dry it out. When you order a catfish plate, you're going to have your plate in 5 to 7 minutes. If you order a burger, it's going to take about 12, 13 minutes, because we cook everything fresh to order. But cooking the burger that way leaves it really juicy, and then we pair it with a Sheila Pardon's sourdough bun, or you have the option of doing a jalapeno and cheese bun, sourdough bun as well from Sheila Pardon. And that bun is really what sets that burger off. I mean, it is delicious.
I'm not familiar with that brand. Is that something local, or is that just a well-known brand I just happen to hear about?
Yeah, no. It's out of East Texas, but once again, we sourced that through Benny Keith.
Yeah, not too far away. We're going to talk a little bit, get around to catfish and other specialties in just a couple of minutes, but you have a large selection of grilled, healthier options, and your website touts those as aligning with the Eat Fit Monroe menu that some Monroe-based health organizations developed. Were those items always there, and they just kind of came into fit with Eat Fit Monroe, or were they a reaction to that initiative itself?
Both. All those items were there, but when you tell your cashier, "Hey, I want the Eat Fit, version of that item," then it's going to be a super low sodium dish without any type of butter or anything like that. Still really good, because we have a zero trans fat grill butter that we can use. But anyway, yes, the items were always there, but we can make them even more healthy than what they already are if you ask for the Eat Fit version of that item.
Yeah, and I will have to say, the theme being diversity and a lot of different things. I mean, you've got grilled ahi tuna, you got salmon, of course, you got shrimp, chicken, and catfish, but mean, that's really the chance to come to a place called Catfish Charlie's and get grilled ahi tuna is not what you might expect. Do you all have many customers that decide that's what they want to do? They want to go that route?
Yes, absolutely. And especially around the first of the year, we have a whole lot of customers that go this route.
Oh, yeah.
But the tuna is a very, very heavy selling item. Salmon being a very second close. The grilled catfish and shrimp are the number one sellers on the grilled menu, but the boiled shrimp has a following because we kind of do that, differently as well. But the boiled shrimp is a widely popular item.
I could see that. And
this time of the year, crawfish, boiled crawfish.
Sure. Oh, yeah, it is the season. Well, I was happy to see, because we've all been to shrimp boils and crawfish boils, that you got the red taters and you got the corn. So
that's right.
That's just, that sounds great. And then we mentioned a little earlier on some of your additions to the menu, your saucy specialties, which is another varied bunch. So you've got catfish darbon and catfish bruin. So tell our listeners about both of those, which I have to say sound really delicious.
All right. Well, thank you. The catfish darbon, I added to the menu probably 10 years ago, and now it's in the top 5 items ordered in our entire lineup and mix. And it is a 4 to 5 ounce catfish fillet. You got your choice of having it fried, grilled, or blackened. It's laid atop of a bed of rice and then covered in a crawfish cream sauce. And then served with some toast, and it is delicious. I prefer to have the catfish blackened on it. I think that's just really what kind of sets it off to me. The bruin is somewhat similar, and it's somewhat similar as well to the swamp fries. As a matter of fact, we brought the swamp fries on because the bruin was selling so well, and it's going to be over the typical bruin. You can still get it grilled or blackened, but it's going to be strips of catfish over a bed of rice. And then we'll have a etouffee sauce, and then we'll have a cream sauce, not the crawfish cream sauce, but a different one. So we'll have a cream sauce on top, and then topped with a little bit of cayenne and parsley flakes, and served with toast as well.
Gotcha. And then, of course, they're I'm sure the star of the show, or at least the highlight spotlight, is the catfish baskets, which pretty much any number of fillets you want. And again, those are hefty 4 to 5 ounce fillets, so they're big and meaty, with fries and hush puppies. And I've heard people bragging about your hush puppies. I guess you can get 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, if you wanted 8, you could get 8 if you're that hungry.
Yeah.
Is 2 or 3 usually what somebody goes for?
2 is the norm. 2 is a half a pound of meat.
Right.
So
it's a lot.
So that's really plenty. I'm a big guy, and that's about all I can eat. A few fries and a hush puppy and 2 fillets.
Good to go, right?
Good to go.
And you mentioned earlier with the bruin that you got strips. So I see there's a choice on your catfish menu of 6 strips, as well as a whole catfish, which is a different animal. But man, it's not hard to get catfish off the bone. Are the strips just what they sound like, just as opposed to thin and crispy, cut horizontally? They're just cut the other way and made into smaller but still thicker pieces?
That's correct. So it is. We do our strips differently, just like we do most things differently. Most folks, when they cut strips, they'll take the fillet of catfish and they'll cut 3 strips along that catfish kind of diagonally. And we cut it straight from top to bottom, so the strip is longer and a little bit more thin, just because I love that crispiness in catfish than a traditional strip. And we brought that on about 4 or 5 years ago, just because we had the only way you could get the fish was thin and crispy, or you could get a whole fillet. And quite frankly, there's folks out there that just like their catfish cooked into strips. So we started offering that, and it's been a good thing.
Great. And then you got, again, we talked about shrimp boil, but you got fried shrimp, fried oysters, you got chicken, and even frog legs. So again, the variety is really impressive. But again, I know you wouldn't serve it and keep it if people weren't eating it.
Yeah, that's right. If it if it doesn't sell, it doesn't stay. And the frog legs in that lineup that you just mentioned, that was one that I brought on just because I always loved frog legs as a kid, and we served the biggest ones that you can find. So once again, it takes a little longer to fry them up, but man, when you get them, you're like, holy moly, these are huge. They barely fit on the plate. Yeah.
And if people happen to be hungry still, and I always find a way, even if I'm taking a box home with me to get dessert, and I see you got 3 choices. You got banana pudding, cheesecake, and then ooey gooey. So do you all make all of those? And what's ooey gooey?
Okay, so we make the banana pudding fresh every day. We make the ooey gooey fresh every day. And the ooey gooey was actually a Paula Deen recipe that I found. And for the first 3 or 4 years that I had the restaurant, I would stay up till midnight, sometimes 1 o'clock, as they got more popular, baking them from the house. And then finally I got smart enough to include that with one of my prep ladies to let her start doing those for us on a daily basis. But it's kind of like what a lot of folks would call a chess pie.
Right.
So it's a vanilla or a yellow cake mix batter bottom with a gooey cream cheese topping on top. And we have people come in literally, Kelly, and they'll buy 10 or 12, at a time to take them home So cheesecake is the only thing that we don't do homemade on that dessert menu, but it is made by Chef John Foles, his company down in New Orleans, and hands down, best cheesecake I've ever put in my mouth. It's a Creole cream cheese cheesecake.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, that's the thing. You find a really good cheesecake. It's like, why am I going to try to make one better than that? That is fabulous.
Exactly.
I will say that I stumbled upon looking for a cheese grits recipe. I stumbled on a Paula Deen cheese grits recipe that we still make, and it is super decadent because Paula doesn't do things that are light, so that's cool.
Right.
Well, listen, I thank you a lot, Doug, for being our guest today on Heaping Spoonful. Best of luck. You sound like you're on a roll, and as I say with so many of my guests on Heaping Spoonful, I got to get to Catfish Charlie's. It sounds fabulous, and I certainly will. I know how to get a hold of you now, so you'll hear when we're coming through.
Yes, please let me know.
Thanks to everybody for listening to Heaping Spoonful today. Remember, we put new episodes up on the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of each month, so check those out and listen to some that you have not heard, perhaps. Have a great rest of your day, and goodbye, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Heaping Spoonful. On behalf of all of us at Benny Keith Foods, Mid-South Division, please know how much we love connecting you with the legends of the culinary scene and their unique stories. I look forward to the next time we can offer you another Heaping Spoonful.